Welcome to another episode of Pathway to the Podium. I'm very excited to have on as a guest sports journalist Caroline Price. She's a contributor to Forbes Sports Money and has covered extensively, and quite well might I add, many sports, but in particular figure skating and gymnastics. She also recently wrote a book chronicling the U.S. women's gymnastics team's triumph at the Paris 2024 Olympic Games. Caroline, it's great to see you.
Great to see you too, Jake. Thanks so much for having me.
Uh, Absolute pleasure. It really is. I want to hit a lot of different subjects here, and
Yeah,
I think maybe the best way to do this is to look back before we look forward. So let's talk a little bit about the Winter Olympics that just happened, in particular with figure skating. And I think maybe the best way to do this is to kind of start broadly and then hone in on specifics. So,
sure.
U.S. They won 3 medals in figure skating at Milan Cortina: gold in the team, gold in women's singles, silver in ice dance. There was some highs and there were also some disappointments. So, how would you assess Team USA's figure skating performance overall over those couple of weeks?
I think it was a bit of a mixed bag. I think there was so much hype going into the games, more so than ever before. It was kind of touted as the best team, best contingent that the United States had sent to
Mm-hmm.
an Olympics in a long time. And I think a lot of the pressure was actually on two athletes who didn't come away with individual golds, which
Yeah.
were Ilia Malinin, of course, and Amber Glenn. As much as Alysa Liu, of course, has been kind of the star emerging from Milan Cortina, Amber Glenn was, in terms of technical ability, the best shot at women's gold. But of course, Alyssa and her, mental strength triumphed above it all. But I think again, there were some disappointing aspects. I mean, of course, we came away with gold in the team competition, very narrow competition with Japan, and that was the second straight gold. The first kind of outright since the Russian Olympic Committee was on the ice in the 2022 Olympics and ultimately was stripped of the gold. So that was the first time that Team USA kind of won that outright. But of course, there was an expectation for Ilia to win gold in the men's singles. And then Madison, Chock, and Evan Bates were heavily favored to win ice dance golds and ended up with silver, which of course is still an accomplishment. That was their first individual medal as a team at the Olympic Games. So that's still an accomplishment for Team USA. And then Alysa Liu winning the first women's gold since 2002. That was, of course,
Huge,
historic. So
absolutely huge. Yeah.
yeah, just a crowning achievement. And figure skating, of course, is in a way kind of the artistic gymnastics of the Winter Olympics. So whoever wins that gold medal, if they're an American, can kind of become America's sweetheart, and we've seen that happen almost overnight for Liu. So I think overall it was a success. There were just certainly points that athletes will look to redeem themselves on moving forward, like in the World Championships, which are coming up this month.
Let's talk a little more about Ilya, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think what might have been somewhat apparent entering this. I mean, like you said, he was the overwhelming favorite. He's received accolade after accolade, racking up countless wins. I mean, it gone viral. Everyone's seen his performances who's followed this sport. I mean, Mike, he is head and shoulders above literally anyone else on the planet. Yet, even during the team event, he looked a bit off. Like he wasn't landing anything cleanly. By his standards, it looked kind of sloppy. And when I was watching the team event, like, don't get me wrong, obviously he was very instrumental there too in helping the U.S. secure the gold. But I thought maybe he's holding back a bit just because he has another competition, which again is fully understandable because I mean he still did his job.
Right.
But now in hindsight, it seems like maybe there was something else going on there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it resurfaced a lot of the conversations we had about mental health with athletes, and Simone Biles specifically from the Tokyo 2021 Olympics, kind of where there's this atmosphere of putting the entire pressure of an Olympic Games, of a nation's performance on the shoulders of one athlete, and a young athlete at that. I mean, Ilya was only 20. And going in, I think there was this sense that he was, impermeable to any kind of competitor and any kind of circumstance. He had triumphed in every circumstance. He won multiple world championships. He had landed the first quadruple axel, landed 7 quads in one competition. I mean, he had broken so
Amazing.
many
Yeah.
records. And I think there was this expectation that, okay, maybe there will be pressure for him that he hasn't dealt with before. It's the Olympics, but he's still so good that he's still going to triumph. I think that was kind of the sentiment even after the team competition, where, like you said, rightly so, he didn't look himself. But that free skate in the men's singles competition was really eye-opening. I mean, it was, for lack of a better word, it was a total collapse. And I think the way he handled himself afterwards was exceptional, and luckily that was a part of the narrative for him with his sportsmanship. But it really is something that I think is worth discussing. I mean, of course, the media needs to cover the nation's athletes, especially when you have a star like this, but how we go about covering them and how they're protected from online conversation, especially with social media being a huge factor nowadays, is something that I think needs to continue to be a huge topic of conversation, because he was clearly affected, and it was unfortunate, but I know he's seeking redemption moving forward.
Yeah, I greatly commend him. Like right after Mikhail Shidorov, excuse me, won, which again was shocking in itself because no one saw that coming. I greatly commend Ilia for immediately going up to him and congratulating him for that. I think that was a really good look on his part. One thing that stood out to me as well, and he mentioned this like after the fact, and also you could see like he was mouthing this at points like during the competition, was he thought that he would have performed better if he had also been at the previous Winter Olympics, if he had been invited. And Caroline, I'm just wondering, and you mentioned this with Simone Biles as well, who of course has been to multiple Olympic Games and has seen almost everything in her incredibly historic career. What exactly is it about the Olympics that's different, that really like gets into these athletes' heads? Because a lot of times with these competitions, who they're competing against at the international stage is very much the same people they compete internationally on other events. So like you're seeing the same people, you're essentially doing the same routine you've trained for, like for that specific routine, maybe for a couple of years, maybe even longer. The only real difference is that maybe the arena is slightly larger, and of course it's being broadcasted to millions upon millions of people across the world. But for the most part, it's still the same. So what is it about the Olympic rings that kind of triggers these feelings of doubt within these athletes?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, I remember hearing a couple times from NBC commentator Johnny Weir about how it really is kind of looking up and seeing those rings either on the sideboards or on the ice, and this surreal feeling of realizing you've kind of reached the ultimate achievement. It has all come down to this. I mean, especially in figure skating and gymnastics, I think there's even more pressure that comes with the Olympic Games because these sports are rarely covered outside of the Olympic cycle. I mean, of course, when you have an exceptional athlete like Ilia or like Simone, they are going to get coverage when they achieve history at a world championship or wherever it might be. But I think there was that added component of, okay, I'm not only at the Olympics, which I've been training for my entire life, but the entire world suddenly knows about me. I think that was a big part of what factored in for Ilia. For Simone, like you said, she has been to 3 Olympics now. She's kind of gone through the ringer and dealt with everything you could imagine for an Olympic athlete. But I think in Tokyo, that's part of what happened. I mean, that's not to say she came into Rio 2016 unknown. She was kind of understood to be the heavy favorite, and she came away with 4 gold medals. So she delivered there. But I think she was still young enough and not as prominent. She wasn't on the level of like a Serena Williams in terms of worldwide recognition. And coming into Tokyo, she was that star and expected to repeat the performance she had in Rio. So I think that's kind of what Ilia experienced as he came in, and not only was he touted as a star, but he suddenly overnight had the expectations of a nation on his shoulders, essentially. And up until that point, it had really only been maybe the U.S. figure skating delegation, himself, and his coaches. So I think it was just kind of a perfect storm of traction and media visibility.
Yeah, you alluded to this earlier, but Amber Glenn likewise seemed to have her own mental difficulties. This was during the women's singles event. She had an invalid element that really proved costly because she bounced back like quite well on the second day, but that invalid element essentially nullified any chance she had at getting on the podium. And that's kind of seems like it was kind of the same thing because I mean she also had a large amount of experience. And I'm sure you saw it. There was like this, like she posted on social media shortly thereafter, like here's the element that I messed up that cost me the medal, and she nailed it perfectly. So like again, it's just one of those things. Yeah, which is difficult to do. Yeah, that's very difficult to do. Yeah, yeah. Again, it's very similar that like they just get stuck into their heads. It's unfortunate, and I think that, and I know the U.S. is I'm talking about like the entire U.S. Olympic and Paralympic team, the institution. I know they've already put in a lot of money when it comes to really focusing on like mental well-being and getting like sports psychologists, and I think they should even put more money and more resources into that moving forward.
I definitely agree. Especially, I think another thing, this sounds simple and almost mundane, but I think the athletes need to put their phones away. It shouldn't, the onus shouldn't be on them, but I remember seeing a lot. I mean, of course, I'm actively following social media during the Olympics, and Amber Glenn was very active, and she was getting a lot of online harassment due to some political comments that she made early on. And they were very surface level comments, kind of reflecting on her experience as a queer woman in the United States, but it kind of unleashed a barrage of harassment on her. And I think it would have been pivotal for a coach to step in there. I know she's a full grown woman, she's 26 years old, but to kind of say, let's take the phone away and let's separate from this. You can't control the uncontrollables, which is the online commentary. And I know that's difficult to ignore at times. I myself deal with it. But it's something, if you want to focus solely on your performance, I think that's another piece, is limiting social media use. And that's all tied into mental health resources and advising athletes on how to safely utilize social media, because they should be allowed to engage with it. They're at the Olympics. It's, the pinnacle of their careers. They should be able to post, but even Alysa Liu, all three women's athletes on the figure skating team, Alysa Liu, Isabeau Levito, and Amber Glenn, received very different levels of harassment, but all, were pretty deplorable. So it's important for these athletes to continue to have that education on how to safely use social media. And I agree. I think more resources should be put into that for the U.S. Olympic team.
Yeah, Kelly, I think you bring up a really good point there as well. I think you saw this firstly with the Paris 2024 games. There's a new generation of athlete now when it comes to the Olympians. And of course, in other sports, this happened much earlier, but I feel like there was kind of like a backlag here. But it feels that now that this age of athlete, of this Olympian, they're much more willing to be online and do all this social media stuff. And with Paris, I mean, you saw that on full display. It was like the social media Olympics all of a sudden. Yeah. And on one hand, that's great because, like, as fans of it, like, we got a ton of access to things that previously we wouldn't had. And like, I know I became lots of fans of athletes because they were sharing their experiences, and they were like sharing, like, during their off time that they're walking through Paris. It's really cool. It's awesome. On the other hand, though, I feel that, like, at times, like, they really get a little too distracted and being their own content creators.
Yeah.
But again, it cuts both ways because, like, for some of these athletes, this obviously is an enormous opportunity to make a name for yourself. Now, with lots of these U.S. athletes, like, they're already relatively well known, and they pop off even more during the Olympics. But for other Olympians, they are truly unknowns. Yeah. And maybe if they make a medal of something exciting happens with them, they can really make a good amount of money from that. And lots of these sports, there are not a lot of those opportunities to begin with. So you have to understand that you have to balance these initiatives now that previously weren't available. So, like, again, there's opportunity there, but at the same time, like, you can't be so hell bent on, like, worrying about what your followers want or getting that post out. It's difficult. It's really difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a great point. I think back on a lighter note to Paris. I don't know if you remember the Muffin Man of the Olympic Village. The athletes were enthralled by the chocolate chip muffins.
Oh yes, village. Yeah.
So that I feel is, like, the good side of social media. We got to see that perspective from inside the village and what the athletes are eating and how they're interacting across countries. And then the same thing happened with tiramisu in Milan Cortina. So that's the bright spot of it. But like you mentioned, it's really interesting. I mean, and kind of infiltrating this creator economy, and everyone's trying to be an influencer and monetize their likeness, and understandably so, because like you said, for a lot of Olympic sport athletes, this is the only opportunity to get that huge visibility. And if you want to monetize yourself, that's your chance to do it. So I think it's a really delicate balance between focusing on performing your best at the Olympic Games and also capitalizing on your performance and your presence at the Games. So it's really interesting because and we have seen, you know, athletes. I think Alysa Liu reminds me of Suni Lee in 2021, just kind of an overnight star. Whereas, you know, as someone who was very much on the inside of the gymnastics community, it was kind of like she was our girl, and now the entire world wants a piece of her in a way. You know, it's I think the same thing is happening for the figure skating community with Alysa Liu, and she's navigating it really well from what I have seen. And I think it's interesting that she has stepped away from World Championships this month to kind of focus on the opportunities she has, the professional opportunities. So it really is crazy how these athletes can become sensations overnight, or, you know, you miss the mark and that's it. You have to wait another 4 years for your moment. So I think that's
very much so.
Great topic of conversation.
Very much so. And speaking of Alysa, how difficult was it, do you think, for her to make the decision to step away from the sport entirely, completely divorce herself from it, when you're already pretty much at the pinnacle or near the pinnacle at a very young age? That's the first thing. And then secondly, come back after a prolonged pause, and you come back revitalized, and you come back even better. I mean, it's quite an accomplishment.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I think for her, I mean, she's really an anomaly mentally. I don't think we've seen an athlete like this, at least not in the subjective sports like figure skating or gymnastics, who, when she says she doesn't get rattled under pressure, you actually believe her. I think a lot of athletes say that, and you're kind of just like, okay, ticky-tack, like you definitely feel the pressure. It's the Olympics. But with Alysa, it did not seem to affect her, and I think that was because she stepped away. I think the decision to leave, from what she said, was easy for her, just because she wasn't enjoying it. She had learned, I think there gets to a point where, I mean, she was being trained so intensively, almost in the methods that you see with Russian skaters. And of course was having kind of a complex relationship with her dad, who was funding the training, but had placed expectations on her that she wasn't comfortable with. And like you said, she placed well at her first Olympics. She was, you know, dubbed this phenom for U.S. figure skating, capable of triple axel, a quadruple jump like the Russian skaters, and just kind of decided to disappear for a little bit, and then found that love of competition while skiing one day, of all things, and decided to come back. And I mean, it was just like the joy that she radiates from her skating is unlike anything I've seen before. And I know there are critiques that her technique isn't as strong as Kaori Sakamoto, for example, or Ami Nakai, a couple of the Japanese skaters, but I mean, her mental fortitude is far and away the strongest of any athlete I've ever seen. And I actually, coming into the Olympics, she was my choice for gold, simply because I had seen her at World Championships the year before, and she did the exact same thing. I mean, and that was even shorter in her comeback. It had only been a handful of months at that point, and she just showed up in Boston and completely blew the socks off of everyone. I mean, and that's to say, I mean, at both World Championships and the Olympic Games, had Kaori Sakamoto skated perfectly cleanly, she would have won. Ami Nakai might have actually taken the title at the Olympics, because she had hit her triple axel twice, but had a little blip on her series, her combination jumps. And Alysa, again, it was like these cool as a cucumber, the steadier competitor won out. And I think it sparked a lot of conversations about, you know, prioritizing both your mental health and physical health. She's not pushing herself to do a quadruple jump again. We had seen her hit a triple axel in practice leading up to the Olympics, but she didn't compete it. You know, I mean, and she ended up not needing it. But for her, it wasn't about the placement. She just wanted to skate for herself, which I think is great.
Yeah, it's much more about the joy of the sport, and I think that's a really good mentality to have, particularly in both figure skating and gymnastics, which is so technical.
Yeah.
and so precise, and you can just really get into your own head. Quickly, how do you assess Levito's performance? She finished 12th overall.
Yeah, I mean, her short program was excellent. I know a lot of American fans, who of course come with their own biases, felt that she was a little bit underscored in the short program. She does have some technical issues with her jumping, so it was, for me, it was to be expected. But her long program free skate was a little disappointing. Of course, you never want to fall to the ice on an Olympic stage, but I think for her, I mean, she was not included in the team event. A lot of people felt bad for her because in a way it was, they were touted as the Blade Angels, and Amber Glenn and Alyssa were both getting most of the press since they were in the team competition. And it's always a little unfortunate that, you know, only two athletes per discipline can be included in a singles competition.
Mm-hmm.
So she had to be left off of the team as she's the third American athlete. But I think for an Olympic debut in her mother's home country, you know, apparently her home was just, you know, 20 minutes from the arena. I think she has a lot to be proud of. And I mean, you're not rarely going to be perfect like Alyssa. It just turned out that way. And she's still so young. She's going to be at Worlds this week. And she's already won a world silver medal before. So I'm hoping that she continues to push forward because, I mean, she should be really proud of her short program. It was almost flawless for her. And there's a lot of positives to take from her performance.
Yeah. So with Madison, Chock, and Evan Bates, and we talked about this right in the beginning,
Yeah.
they got silver, and this was in the ice dance final. And don't get me wrong, silver's really great,
Yeah.
but there was expectation that they probably should have maybe gotten gold because, number one, they had done so well on the World Championship stage previously. I think they were like 3 times in a row, I think. Is that correct? Yeah,
Yep, correct.
3 times in a row. And how about we now dig into this controversy with one particular judge that scored their Olympic skating?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, it was a silver medal is always a great thing, but for them there was kind of this expectation, especially after the team event. They were scored the highest by the panel. So in ice dance, whether this should be the way or not, because of the subjectivity of the sport, oftentimes you'll see a routine and it won't look much different from something they've done before. And the scoring just won't shift a ton. Like there's this expectation that Bates and Chock are scoring within this level, and it's not going to deviate a ton every competition because you're not seeing huge throws like in the Paris competition. They're not throwing a triple axel. The twizzles are very technical, but they're easier. I don't want to say they're easier, but the precision is simpler to nail than a gigantic triple axel. You're not going to see falls often in ice dance. So there's not a glaring difference between the skates, but in the singles competition for the ice dance, we did see a glaring difference with the French team. We saw them out of sync in their twizzles, whereas Chock and Bates were in sync. They were a little slower in their twizzles than some people would have liked. But the Canadian pair were also very much in sync. So there was an obvious glaring discrepancy between the top three. The pair that was in first had an obvious error. And for that reason, people were outraged because we saw in a similar circumstance to 2002, a French judge clearly underscored the American pair and the Canadian pair and boosted the scores of the French duo. And I do want to make a point in saying nationalism in judging is not exclusive to just the French. It has happened for many nations. I was doing a deep dive into the data even after the women's singles competition, where we saw a judge from a formerly Eastern Bloc country scoring the Russian athlete extremely high compared to the rest of the athletes. And we also saw that with American judges. The American judges almost always favored American skaters. So it certainly isn't black and white, but in this case, I'm forgetting what the data was, but I think it was like 5 points above the average. The French judge awarded the French team a score exponentially higher and statistically significantly higher than the trimmed mean of the panel. So it was quite controversial, and ultimately the panel itself, of the 9 judges, 5 of the 9 did rank the Americans above the French. However, because we rely on a trimmed mean, the French came out on top. So it was, extremely controversial, especially considering the controversy with the personal lives of the French team. So Cizeron and Fournier Boudry. Fournier Boudry's former partner and significant other has been accused of sexual assault of a minor. So there was this feeling that they shouldn't even be allowed to compete. The two of them have been vocal in supporting this partner, and a lot of detractors from this team feel that they're kind of apologizing sexual assault. So there was definitely a sentiment that, coupled with the kind of suspicious scoring of the team, it was just an unfavorable result, I think, for the figure skating community. And I do want to say, I think the French duo did have a fluidity to their skating that Chock and Bates, I don't think, have. Of course, it's personal opinion. I mean, the sport is so subjective, and especially ice dance, it's the most subjective of the disciplines. But for me, they do have a certain fluidity that we didn't see from Chock and Bates. But actually, I would have put Paul Poirier and Piper Gilles of Canada in the gold medal spot. They were, in my opinion, the cleanest and married fluidity with precision in their twizzles. So long-winded answer, but that's kind of the gist of the situation and my perspective on who should have won out. I think it should have been Canada, United States, and France in that order.
That's great context. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So like when it comes to the scoring, what can be done, Caroline, to avoid having these scoring issues? Like what can be done to the system that can be revitalized or something in order to kind of take out these discrepancies or these concerns that there is some sort of bias underlying whatever the score is?
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest solution that a lot of people are vocalizing advocacy for is not allowing judges from a certain nationality to judge a competition if athletes from their country are competing. This doesn't entirely remove the risk, because there are often, in the past, we've had issues, especially in 2002, with a French judge was being paid to boost a Russian team's score, and that result was actually reversed due to the corruption that was exposed. It wasn't as severe at Milan Cortina, such that the ICU has not taken any action. But it's something that needs to be discussed. I think that to eliminate or at least lessen national bias is the first key step, and I think it's a relatively simple solution. It's of course not foolproof. It's, there's going to be bias across different nations, and oftentimes you'll see judges move from Russia to Estonia, and they'll change delegations. So you might have an Estonian judge, but they might really be Russian. But that, of course, we can't, nail all the birds with one stone. Mm-hmm. I think it's a process. We got to chip away at it. And I think that's the clear first step to ensure more objectivity. But it's going to be inherent to the sport for as long as it goes on. It's just such a subjective sport, and I've seen conversations between the gymnastics and figure skating communities and how the sports are similar but also differ in their judging. Gymnastics has more defined technical requirements than figure skating. Figure skating score, because of the grade of execution, sure, we have a technical panel that determines what elements have been performed, but then we have judges determining the grade of execution and the component score, which the component score is extremely subjective. Whereas in gymnastics, it's clear what's been performed, and there are more clear outlines on how to judge artistry. Whereas in figure skating, it's, did you think this athlete crossed the ice enough? Do you think they used different edges enough? I mean, it's really open-ended, and I think maybe narrowing that down a little bit more to mirror gymnastics, which of course gymnastics judging is also imperfect. Mm-hmm. But I think that's another step that figure skating fans and experts want to see taken.
I was going to ask you, which of these two sports do you think had the more asinine rules when it came to scoring? But like you just answered that essentially, and that's interesting that you said that. Because I feel like in both cases, sometimes, and even some athletes have been vocal about this, that it's partially based off of vibes.
Yeah.
Do you share that sentiment?
Yeah, no, that's funny you put it that way, because I think it was maybe 3 weeks ago. I posted a tweet joking about, so in elite gymnastics, we have a difficulty score, a D score, and an execution score, an E score. And I was joking at this point, we should just add a V score for vibes. So yeah, it's like you're right on the same page. But that was actually stemming from conversation. I mean, if we're talking about asinine judging, I will be the first to say that NCAA gymnastics is the epicenter of asinine judging. It's truly disappointing, honestly. I mean, as much as I love the sport and I cover it, there's really no rhyme or reason to the scores that are being given out. So I would say elite gymnastics has everything together a bit more than figure skating and NCAA gymnastics. Those two I will group together in terms of just I don't want to say zero structure or predictability, but it really seems like you don't know what you're going to get from the panel each time. That, or you know exactly what you're going to get, like if an athlete is wearing a certain color leotard or they're coming from a certain delegation. I do want to mention really interestingly, and I could probably send you a link to this interview, Piper Gilles and Paul Poirier, the Canadian athletes who won bronze in the ice dance. Piper was very vocal about ice dance corruption in judging after the Olympics, and they were overjoyed to win their first individual Olympic medal. However, they have finished second at the World Championships to Chock and Bates 2 times. And they were also very vocal about feeling that they should not have finished second at those Worlds. Interestingly, a lot of people who were reacting to the French team being boosted above Chock and Bates kind of felt like it was karma, because they felt that Chock and Bates had benefited from similar unfair scoring for years. There have been times where Chock and Bates have made mistakes on their twizzles at a world championship and seemingly were not penalized. So this has been kind of a common denominator in ice dance. A lot of fans feel that there is kind of a designated first place team, and no matter how they perform, they're going to win. And that was kind of the sentiment going into the Olympics. A lot of people felt that was Chock and Bates, and then the judges made it clear that it was going to be Cizeron and Fournier-Boudry in the first dance of the competition. It was clear that they were going to score Chock and Bates right below them, and no matter what happened in the free dance, that was how things were going to pan out, and that unfortunately was the result. So it's interesting how the dancers themselves can kind of see through it and read between the lines. And Gilles and Poirier are going to be at World Championships this week, so it will be very interesting to see how things pan out, because they will be competing again against the French team, whereas Chock and Bates have withdrawn from this year's World Championship. Yeah. So it'll be really interesting.
Yeah, and just close the book on the Olympics. I just want to also quickly acknowledge the Japanese in pairs skating in particular, Riku Mihara and Ryoichi Kihara. Spectacular. Like, honestly, that may have been the best thing I've ever seen in terms of figure skating in my life. My jaw was on the floor watching that performance. The second night, I mean, it was so emotional, and they just absolutely delivered.
They really did. I mean, I'm right there with you. I had chills watching that performance. And they were the world champions coming in, so there was so much pressure on them. That similar to, Ilia, of course, they weren't getting the same level of coverage, but in their home country of Japan, there were definitely a lot of expectations, because Japanese figure skating has been, kind of the cream of the crop for the last couple years, and they really delivered. I mean, I think their emotion especially was so spectacular and kind of Olympic in a way, just to see them break down and realize they had done exactly what they needed to come from behind, because I believe they were in 5th after the short program, and a lot of people counted them out, especially with the German team surging, and they managed to hurdle their whole way to the front, and that was a huge bright spot, I agree, in the Olympics. I mean, it was just refreshing to see such a clean performance get rewarded. There wasn't any controversy. I think a lot of people look at that competition as kind of the bright spot of the Olympics, because there was the results weren't controversial. Everyone across the board was happy with their medal, and the fans were too. So I think it was a great bright spot in Milan.
Yeah. So shifting from Milan to Prague, 2026 World Figure Skating Championships are being held there this week. As you mentioned last year they were held in Boston, which is really awesome given our Massachusetts connection. It's somewhat weird though that the World Championships are held so shortly after the Olympics. And you said this already. As a result, like, there are lots of prominent skaters, such as, you know, the reigning champ Alysa, as you said, Chock and Bates. They aren't defending their Olympic title and or previous world titles. But I believe Ilia is competing. Amber and Levito are competing. Who do you think are the potential favorites, U.S. or otherwise, for this event in Prague?
Yeah, so like you said, it's really interesting because only one of the Olympic champions is returning, and that is Fournier Boudry and Cizeron in the ice dance. Everyone else is taking the world championship off, including Shaidarov from Kazakhstan. So Malinin will definitely come in as a favorite once again, but he is going to have to face off against Kageyama and Shun Sato of Japan, who won silver and bronze at the Olympics. And Kageyama has won multiple silver medals at Worlds, so
He's really good. He
was fantastic in Milan, especially in the team event, and he has the potential to win gold if Malinin slips up again. I mean, Ilia has been essentially perfect on the World Championship stage, but it'll be really interesting to see how he responds. You know, just quite literally a month after the Olympics ended, and can he put this behind him and skate calmly and cleanly? Of course, the number of eyes on him won't be as large as they were in Milan Cortina, but since the World Championships are so shortly after the Olympics, I think there is increased visibility right now. So I think it'll be a great test for him to see how he responds. And then in the women's event, I think Kaori Sakamoto is definitely the favorite. It would be her final world championship. She's 25. She's expressed that she's going to retire after this competitive season, and this would be the close of the competitive season. So she has already won the world title 3 times. I know she's hungry to get back to the top of the podium after Alysa won last year. But I do think Amber Glenn, I have high expectations for her for this world championship. I think the Olympics, of course, they didn't go exactly as she had hoped, but she showed so much potential and promise in the free skate and the women's singles program. Of course, she made one small slip up on her final jump, which again was the same jump she popped in the short program. So I know she's going to be keen on hitting that at the World Championships. But if she skates cleanly, she could win gold. I would love to see her on the podium. She has not won an individual world medal, so I think that would be a huge accomplishment for her. And then I really think, and she was my dark horse coming into the Olympics, Ami Nakai of Japan, who's only 17 years old, along with Amber Glenn, has the triple axel. She nailed it twice at the Olympics. She has the star power, I think, to take gold if Kaori and Amber are a little bit off. Ami really had the gold medal in the palm of her hands last month in Milan. She just, as I said, slipped up on a combination, and if she had hit that, it would have been Alysa in silver and Ami in gold. So she's, in my opinion, a real contender for the gold medal. And then in pair skating, it's really interesting. So there was the U.S. national champions in pair skating were not permitted to be on the Olympic team due to Efimova, the female skater. She did not achieve citizenship in time to compete.
Oh, okay.
So they were considered top contenders for the podium in pair skating, and pair skating has traditionally been the U.S.'s weakest event, and they performed incredibly at the Olympics. We had Danny Olson. They just were lights out in the team competition. But this team, if they had been on the U.S. Olympic team, would have completely closed the door on Japan for gold early on. So I think they're going to be in contention, as well as the Olympic silver and bronze medalists will both be competing in pair skate. So that's going to be a really close competition. We won't see the Japanese who won gold. They're taking the world championship off. But that's going to be a great competition. And then ice dance, of course, as I mentioned, we've got the French coming back, and then the Canadian team that won bronze. And then will be exciting is, of course, we don't have Chock and Bates, but Emilia Zingis and Vadim Kolesnik they finished 5th in Milan. They're kind of the up-and-comers in U.S. ice dance, and ice dance has always been a great discipline for Team USA, and they have a ton of potential. So I could see them sneaking onto the podium as well.
Awesome. And yeah, so these World Championships will be on NBC, and coverage is also on Peacock, so be sure to watch. It's going on throughout this entire week, so make sure everyone checks in for that. Switching sports now to gymnastics. I wanted to talk to you, Caroline, in particular, about what happened in Paris 2024, since you covered it so extensively again, particularly Jordan Chiles and the women's floor exercise finals. So just bear with me for a second. I just want to walk the viewers through this really quickly because the context really matters here, which I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
So here with the floor exercise final, Chiles initially received a score of 13.666, and that put her in fifth place and, of course, off the podium. Romanian gymnast Ana Barbosu got third place at that time with a score of 13.7, so slightly more. Chiles' coach issues a challenge, arguing that the difficulty score on an element had been undervalued. The judges review, and they agree, and they add 1/10 to Chiles' score, which gives her 13.766, more than the 13.7, so then at that point, she has the bronze. After competition is over, the Romanian delegation appeals to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, CAS, which is this international body that's located in Switzerland, and they handle lots of sports disputes. And the Romanian delegation argues that Chiles' coach did not issue the challenge in time. For Chiles, there was a 1 minute period to challenge. She was going last, so it was a 1 minute period to challenge. And Romania says that the challenge came 4 seconds too late. CAS rules that the challenge was submitted late and therefore invalid. So since the challenge was submitted late, you don't get that extra point. So Chiles does not get that 1/10. She falls back to fifth place. But we're not done. So then the United States challenges the CAS's ruling in Switzerland's Federal Supreme Court, because again, CAS is located in Switzerland. The Swiss Supreme Court reviews newly obtained video footage, which shows that the challenge was made within the 1 minute timeline. Supreme Court vacates CAS's arbitration ruling, essentially kicking it back down to CAS for a new proceeding, which will include examining this new video evidence. Caroline, this is an absolute mess.
Yep. That's the best way to put it. It's horrific. It's been a mess for both the athletes, and it's unprecedented as well. We had something somewhat similar, at least at its start, at the 2004 Olympics in the men's all-around. Paul Hamm of the United States won that competition, but there was an athlete from Hong Kong who actually would have won it had the judges performed properly, but the error was not challenged in the field of play, so it went dead, and Paul Hamm proceeded to retain his Olympic gold medal, and nothing was done from there. But this was completely unprecedented because the call was made in the field of play. Jordan was awarded the bronze medal. They had this ceremony, and then after the fact, it was stripped from her. So this was just kind of completely unprecedented and horrific for the U.S. delegation and for Chiles, and continues to be horrific for both of them. I think both athletes, I saw them compete actually last month at Stanford. It was a UCLA Stanford gymnastics meet, and they have both, kind of led in the forms of sportsmanship while this arbitration continues to play out. And it's just unfortunate that they've been entangled in this mess. I know a lot of people feel that both athletes should just receive the bronze medal, but it's feeling like it is very much trending in Chiles' direction right now. It's kind of been a pendulum swing. It was awarded to Chiles, or initially awarded to Barbosu, went to Chiles, then was taken from Chiles, given to Barbosu, and now it seems like it's leaning back towards going to Chiles. So it's just, I think the general sentiment, and this is correct in my opinion, is that the organizers completely failed to do their jobs on the stage at the Olympic Games in many different respects that sometimes aren't covered. In fact, the other Romanian athlete, Sabrina Vonea Maneca, was deducted for an out-of-bounds deduction that did not happen. Had this not been taken, she would have won the bronze, and we wouldn't even be having this discussion. So they made that error there. Her inquiry, I believe, on the field of play was rejected. You typically cannot inquire against neutral deductions, which includes an out-of-bounds. And at the same time, they then went on to devalue an element by Jordan, which was her leap. And in my opinion, the leap was actually short. So I do not think that the inquiry should have been accepted by Team USA, interestingly. But the way they handled it, they went ahead and approved it, took it from Anna, gave it to Jordan. It was just deplorable in so many aspects. The fact that these young athletes were just kind of at the whims of infrastructural incompetence is infuriating, in my opinion.
What also makes this so complicated, number one, is that you have essentially a federal court overturning an international arbitrational body, which is very strange. That's weird to begin with. Like, yeah. I'm not telling you, like is that like no one really knows? Is that like jurisdictionally, like I don't know. That's one thing. And then the second thing, of course, as well, is that with the Court of Arbitration for Sport, they try to avoid getting into this stuff as much as possible.
Right.
To just draw like a parallel here, just for an example, which I think might be easier for like viewers to understand who aren't as familiar with gymnastics.
Yeah.
Like for instance, like with like a football game with like the NFL. I think back to there was this NFC Championship game in 2018 between the Rams and the Saints. There was a very egregious non-pass interference called made by the refs, in which essentially the receiver was tackled, but prior to the receiver catching the pass, yeah. And the referees did not throw a flag in that instance. So the Court of Arbitration for Sport, if they were presented with that, they're not going to be like, oh, you guys should have thrown a flag. We have to replay the game from however much time is left in the game. They're not going to do that. Mm-hmm. So here in this instance with Chiles, it appears that it has more having to do with the procedural matter itself. So it's not like they're saying, oh, like someone scored something wrong specifically, like the refereeing was wrong or whatever, or like they missed something. It's saying, no, the procedure itself of the 1 minute, the rule wasn't applied as stated. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, no, that sounds correct. And you're correct in saying the CAS rarely does get involved in these matters, which makes it even more interesting. And I think another layer to it as well, the American side has felt that there was kind of improper meddling from the Romanian delegation. Nadia Comaneci, the famed Romanian gymnast, the first to score a perfect 10 at the Olympics, she has a lot of leverage and I believe had a connection within the CAS, which got this, which helped escalate this situation back in August of 2024 and actually resulted in the overturning of the results. So there's this sentiment that the Romanian delegation, because of their tenure and reputation in the world of gymnastics, were able to influence the results improperly. And from what I have heard, the U.S. team and Jordan's delegation has argued that this video evidence that her coach, Cecile Landy, filed the inquiry in time has been in existence for a while. That's what they claimed initially. What I had read was that it was initially ignored by the team reviewing the case. It was not accepted as evidence. And now here we are, in spring of 2026, and it is being accepted. They are going to review it again. So, I mean, again, it's like, why are we not taking a look at every piece of evidence we had back in 2024? Instead, now we've dragged this on for a year and a half and counting because it moves very slowly. And they're just now considering evidence that apparently was in existence. It was video evidence from a documentary team that we've had since August of 2024, and it's just now being accepted as evidence. So it's really you kind of shake your head at it and how it's been handled, and it raises a lot of concerns about how much integrity that is being maintained within this process. I mean, who has been infiltrating and affecting the decision making here? Or we're hoping that moving forward after the Swiss Supreme Court's ruling and handing it back to CAS with so many eyes on it now, I have higher hopes that it's going to be delegated correctly. But again, it's been such, for lack of a better word, a shit show for the last year and a half.
It has.
Expectations are low. But I do know that Jordan Chiles has expressed, I think her quote was that she felt she could finally breathe after learning that the evidence had been accepted and her appeal had been accepted. But again, then you think back to Barbosu. Both of them are competing in the NCAA right now, and it's a lot to deal with while you're trying to, finish out the freshman year of college for Barbosu and her senior year for Chiles. So it's a lot for two young people to handle.
And Chiles just had an extremely good Big Ten championship, by the way.
We sure did.
And I think, like, we shift now to talking about all of these NCAA conference championships. Perhaps it's no bigger story right now than Clemson upsetting Stanford in the ACC, which is Clemson's program's first title in gymnastics, which is really incredible. What storylines stick out to you, Caroline, over the past week?
So, as you said, the Clemson storyline is huge. I'm actually working on an article right now. I was talking with the head coach yesterday and two of the athletes who were instrumental in winning that title on Saturday. And that, I think, that sticks out in so many ways. One, of course, it was an upset. They defeat number 7 Stanford, which is the team Barbosa is on. She performed excellently on Saturday. She won the ACC title on floor. But Clemson's win is really a great indicator for women's gymnastics moving forward, especially in the ACC. Talking with head coach Justin Howell yesterday, he expressed to me how supportive the administration at Clemson has been of their program. It was something that they really did their homework on to support gymnastics. It's only in their third year as an intercollegiate program, and they've won a conference championship. And that is a direct result, from what Justin told me, of concerted effort, financial support, athlete resources, an incredible facility that is among the best in the world. And it's resulted in fan turnout. They've had multiple sellouts this year. That win, I think, is a triumph in many different ways, not just for Clemson, but for the sport of gymnastics. It's a great indicator that there is potential for creating and growing new programs. And as an ACC grad, I went to the University of Virginia. I would love to see UVA one day replicate the success Clemson made. So that, of course, was the biggest highlight for me this weekend. But then the Florida Gators in the SEC, a lot of people don't want to call it an upset because they have such a stacked team, but they did defeat number 1 Oklahoma and number 2 LSU for the SEC
Yeah,
title.
it's big.
Yeah, it was huge. Florida, they did not actually break the uneven bars record because they set the record last year at the SEC championships, but they got very close this year with basically a lights out rotation to overtake Oklahoma, and I think that was the result. The correct result there. There's, of course, with subjective scoring, there was a lot of controversy online with Oklahoma fans who felt that they were wrongly bumped into second, but I think the results there were correct, and that's huge for Florida. I think Florida has a lot to prove this year. They have far and away the most stacked roster. They have multiple former elites, world champions, one of the top transfers in the country, MJ Frazier. In my opinion, anything less than a national title this year is a failure with how stacked their roster is. So it was really good to see them finally perform to their potential at SECs. And then Utah, of course, ran away with Big 12 title. That's to be expected. And they're kind of surging in the late season. I think they're a little bit of a dark horse. It feels wrong to say that because they're one of the most winning programs in NCAA gymnastics history, but they had a really rough start to this season, and I think are, as a result, seeded lower than expected. So I think they can climb their way up to the national championship. And then, of course, Big Tens, UCLA ran away with it. It was tight through a couple of rotations with Michigan State. They were performing better than expected. They've had kind of a down year. And then Jordan Chiles, of course, scoring another perfect 10 on floor, winning the all-around title, setting a conference record for both the score and the number of titles she won. I mean, truly just an incredible season. I think she's headed towards multiple postseason awards. She's likely going to win the AAI award, which is essentially the Heisman Trophy for senior gymnasts. And it's a comprehensive award. It considers, athletic output, contribution to her team, and extracurriculars. So I think she's headed straight for that. And what will be really interesting looking forward for NCAAs is the all-around battle we're expecting between Kaylin Chio of LSU. She made history a couple weeks ago, scoring 3 perfect 10s in one meet. And then Jordan Chiles, of course, who won the Big Ten all-around title. I think we're seeing a really heavyweight battle for the all-around title between the two of them that's starting to take shape. So that's something I'm most looking forward to going towards the postseason.
And the NCAA championships will be held in Fort Worth, Texas on April 16th through the 18th. Why the long layoff between that and the conference championship? Seems a bit weird.
So the postseason, is actually quite prolonged. So the conference championships, of course, we had last week, and then the postseason will begin April 1st. So it is interesting. It might be logistical to deal with March Madness. Unfortunately,
That actually might be it. Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah, so that's something that we've had to contend with for a while. It always falls around the time of March Madness. A lot of gymnastics fans bemoan that fact, as it can sometimes detract from viewership. We've had record viewership for the national championship for gymnastics in recent years. So sometimes of course, we've got so many great sports going on. Gymnastics is not going to be at the forefront for a lot of people, and we want to see it that way. So I think it does have to do partially with scheduling, but then also the fact that the regular season is long. It's 10 plus weeks. And then you have the conference championships. I think the rest is definitely needed for these teams. A lot of teams are kind of hanging on by a thread by the time they get to conference championships, because there's really no break between the regular season and conference championships. It's another week and suddenly you're competing in the SEC championship. So I think it's something that's appreciated by athletes, but at the same time, it's possible that you might kind of lose your touch in a couple weeks, especially when you become accustomed to in NCAA gymnastics competing every single week, sometimes twice. So going from that really high frequency to just practicing is something that will be interesting for freshmen to navigate with, but luckily they have veterans on their teams to help them figure that out and stay sharp for postseason.
And this appears to be true for lots of NCAA sports, where you have one sport really gets stretched into the next season. So football goes well into the winter season, and I mean, now we're seeing this with gymnastics going well into the spring season, and there are other sports as well too. So I mean, it's a very, very long season for these athletes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I'm sure it's being talked about in the board meetings, but we see so many Achilles injuries and ACL injuries to a lesser degree in women's gymnastics. And oftentimes the Achilles injuries can be from overuse and just repeated pounding. ACLs are more of an impact injury. But there's a lot of discussions as to whether or not we should shorten the season or slow it down. I mean, they really are competing every single week. And the training hours are lessened significantly because some of these athletes were either training elite, so on the Olympic track, or they were the JO level 10, which is the highest club level you can be in the United States. And that requires a full-time job of practice. It's 40 hours a week plus sometimes in the gym. And you go from that to training maybe 3 hours a day in college and having a day off. So it's pretty jarring for these athletes, and you see a lot of injuries come through in college. And some teams manage it better than others, but there's definitely conversations going on as to whether gymnastics is too much for these athletes and their limbs. How can we make it safer such that we're prolonging careers and not shortening them?
Yeah. Switching subjects here, Iowa State recently announced that it is ending its women's gymnastics program, and they're going to be replacing it with another women's sport, which is to be named later. Now, the school has said that they will honor all athletic scholarships for anyone who stays on the team who chooses not to transfer. Looking back here, Caroline, if you can kind of identify certain breadcrumbs indicating that the shuttering of this program could occur, and a lot of this has to do with the fact that KJ Kindler, and you recently posted about this on social media, how she left for Oklahoma, and OU had so much success.
Yeah.
Essentially, Iowa State was kind of left behind. If you could go into that into more detail, I'd
Sure.
greatly appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So as you said, KJ Kindler was the head coach of Iowa State in the early 2000s. She was also an athlete there. So it was kind of her baby in a way. I think she wanted to stay with Iowa State. And she led them from being a below average NCAA program to the Super Six, which is the gymnastics national championship. And created multiple Big 12 champions. I mean, she was immediately producing output for Iowa State when she took the helm as a head coach. And when she had that extremely successful season that ended in the Super Six, she really took that opportunity to advocate for better resources for her athletes, which they did not have AC in the gym. They didn't have safe pits to land in. I mean, kind of really basic resources that gymnastics facilities must have to function safely were not being created for the Cyclones athletes. And KJ realized in that moment that she was not going to have the support of the administration to build the program that she felt her athletes deserved. So she was given the offer at Oklahoma, and the rest was history. I mean, now she's one of the winningest coaches in NCAA gymnastics in college sports. And many consider her to be the GOAT of college coaching. I mean, she did the same thing with Oklahoma that she did with Iowa State, which is the interesting parallel. I mean, I wrote an article, like you mentioned, about how Iowa State kind of really just missed their opportunity there. They had a diamond in their hands and let Oklahoma take her, and now she's built this empire at Oklahoma. Oklahoma for a while wasn't known for having the best facilities, but it had air conditioning. You know, she had support of the administration. Clearly they hired her because they wanted to build a program. And now she has a multi-million-dollar facility that was recently renovated. The team is going for their 8th national championship, and Iowa State is at the same time closing down. I think there's a realm of possibility where KJ Kindler would have wanted to do this with Iowa State. She has been in tears in interviews talking about the state of the program for the Cyclones. So this was clearly something that mattered a lot to her, but she opted to go to Oklahoma because that's where she felt she could succeed and could see athletes succeed. And instead, I mean, as you said, there were many breadcrumbs for Iowa State. It was kind of clear this season that things were headed in a bad direction. Their hire, Ashley Miles-Grieg, she was an excellent athlete as an NCAA gymnast, but did not have a lot of experience coaching. So when she was hired, there were some concerns, especially considering we've had high-level athletes be hired as coaches before, and they don't have the ability, they were excellent athletes, but weren't excellent coaches. It doesn't always translate. We saw that with Courtney Kupets-Carter at Georgia. The Georgia really struggled under her, and she was the best Georgia gymnast of all time. So we saw something similar with Ashley Miles-Grieg. The team initially had a good performance in her first season, and then quickly fell off. And a lot of people initially put the onus on her, but it was later revealed that the Iowa State administration had absolutely no support for the athletes, for the coaches. There was vocalizations by athletes for years about the coach and how she was either, didn't have proper resources, they didn't feel safe training, and apparently these claims were ignored or just completely silenced by the administration, and many athletes have come out to speak against this. So it was kind of as if Miles-Grieg was set up for failure along with her athletes. And that's, it seems in a way, a lot of people are hypothesizing that the administration wanted to see it play out this way. They were, looking to get rid of the gymnastics program. So there wasn't a lot of effort put into saving it. It was, let it middle and then crash and burn. And we saw the team first, they canceled a meet early on this season versus West Virginia, and then a couple weeks later they canceled the season, and then a couple weeks later they canceled the program. It was a very quick progression, but a lot of people within the community did see it coming as soon as they canceled that dual meet versus West Virginia.
And what's really astonishing here as well, we're talking about a Big 12 school and a prominent one at that. And unfortunately, there are other instances of this with other schools at Power 5 schools in which they are cutting certain programs. Mm-hmm. And of course, they still have to be Title IX compliant and still maintain, a certain number of women's sports. But you're definitely seeing, that there's some penny pinching going on here because there's a realization that they're flooding more and more of their financial resources into the top sports for them, which in lots of cases is football. Right. It's basketball as well, though even some basketball programs are feeling the heat at the moment too when it comes financially. So it's really tricky.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think as a journalist, I try to see both sides of the equation. And I do understand gymnastics is a very expensive sport to uphold, to maintain. And the fact that we see a university like Clemson putting all these resources into it is a great sign, but it's an anomaly for a reason. We've seen HBCU gymnastics, which seemed so promising when Fisk opened the inaugural program, and now this is their final season. They hardly made it 5 years. We've seen programs pop up and then disappear overnight, because it is so difficult to field a gymnastics arena, to finance it. Every aspect of gymnastics, from the leotards to the grips to the equipment, is so expensive. And I believe LSU Gymnastics, which of course is one of the most prominent programs in the sport, they won the national title in 2024. They have the most social media viewership of any team. They are even, I think, non-revenue. I believe LSU posted their numbers from last year, and gymnastics still had a net loss, I think, of $2 million. So that's one of the, visibly and superficially, one of the most profitable and most successful programs, but when you lift the curtain up, it actually isn't. So, I mean, I understand. I mean, it's a money game. As much as an administrator might love the sport of gymnastics, they can't always finance it. So, I think there are people in our sport who understand that. But it was so refreshing, and I'll be coming out with this article either later today or tomorrow about the Clemson team and how supported they have been by their administration and given an opportunity to succeed. So I think, in conjunction with Iowa State, looking to Clemson as an example, I think is something that will be useful for administrators going forward to see if creating and financing a gymnastics program is feasible.
Yeah, very, very tough. Last thing, and it's an important thing, you recently wrote a book.
I did.
Flipping the Script, the 2024 U.S. Gymnastics Team's Journey to Olympic Gold. First of all, it's a great read. And I mean, you chronicle lots of the gymnasts in here almost meet by meet, and you can really kind of see the story of years and years of training come together for the 2024 Olympics. I want to focus on one athlete in particular, and we talked about her a little bit earlier, Suni Lee.
Yeah.
You know, she had gold at the COVID-delayed Tokyo Olympics in 2021 in the individual all-around, and she was extremely instrumental in the U.S. securing silver in the team final. And that was, of course, after Simone Biles withdrew because she had the twisties. Mm-hmm. In the aftermath of that, something really strange happened to Suni. She had swelling which started in her ankles, and it was really severe swelling. And then it spread throughout her entire body. And we're talking enormous amounts here. And you say this in the book that she actually gained 40 pounds in just a few weeks, which is absolutely horrifying for anyone just to think about that. Mm-hmm. She was diagnosed with a kidney disease, and the question quickly became not whether she'd be able to compete again, but whether she could even just go back to the life she previously had.
Yeah.
And you go over this quite specifically, and if you go into more detail here, I think the audience would really appreciate it, because it's quite a trial that she went through.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so this happened in her second and final season with the Auburn Tigers, and she had made history in her first season. She won SEC and national titles. She was bringing elite skills to the NCAA stage. She was the first Olympic all-around champion to compete in NCAA gymnastics, so she was bringing so much visibility to the sport. And she also helped Auburn to a Final Four appearance. So, I mean, it was just, she was kind of on cloud nine. She had these huge accomplishments in Tokyo, and then went on to have even more accomplishments in the NCAA. And then her sophomore season, as you mentioned, she woke up one day and her ankles were completely swollen, her hands were swollen. She couldn't even wrap her hands around the uneven bars. She had no idea why. Her doctors were baffled, her coaches were baffled, why this seemingly very healthy young athlete, still a teenager, at her prime in her sport, suddenly kind of ballooned overnight. And as you said, she gained almost 40 pounds in 2 weeks, which is so jarring for anyone, but then also for someone who's actively competing in a Division I sport, is still training elite on the side. I mean, she's an extremely high-level athlete, and just to have this happen out of nowhere was so jarring for her, so demoralizing. And not to mention, she's a teenager, she's a college student. There's so many different levels of shame and fear that come with that. She's still a young kid. I mean, it's so much to deal with while you still have all these eyes on you and questions about coming back for Paris. I mean, it was just so much for her to handle, and she ultimately had to withdraw from the NCAA season early, and kind of fought through that kidney disease. She was diagnosed, didn't go into remission for a while, and didn't even know she was going to be able to continue to train in her sport. She initially, in the back of her head, did want to try for Paris, but when this disease and the onset was so sharp and sudden, she questioned if she could even wrap her hands around the bars and complete a bar routine. And she actually did end up coming back the next year, competing in elite. And then the fact that she was able to go on to make the Olympic team, not only for the second time, it's rare for an Olympic all-around champion to come back and do well. The U.S. has had success in that recently because the team has been so strong, but she not only did that, but she did that while fighting kidney disease, while still being in treatment. She also competed a skill that had never been seen before. It was later named after a Chinese gymnast, as she wasn't the first to do it on the international stage, but she was still pushing the envelope, pushing boundaries in the sport while being actively sick, and still dealing with swelling. And her training was extremely limited as a result. So imagine training for the Olympic Games. You're already, counting down the days. It goes by so quickly. But then you're also having to contend with a chronic illness, and training far away from home. She said her dad's been paralyzed. I mean, she's got so many different obstacles she had to deal with. And not to mention, I know I mentioned this in the book, but she also had severe imposter syndrome from Tokyo. She felt that she didn't deserve to win the gold medal, as it was Simone's gold medal to win. So there's so many layers to the psyche that Suni was dealing with going into Paris. And the fact that she came away with bronze in the all-around, bronze on the uneven bars, and helped Team USA to gold, and was instrumental in helping them to gold. I mean, it's truly a story for the ages, which is why I felt it needed to be told. I mean, every one of those athletes had very complex and interesting and emotionally evocative stories. But Suni's, I think, above all, was such a triumph, both mentally and physically, and it really spoke to her love for the sport and her dedication to her craft, because there were so many times she could have just given up. And I know, talking to her coaches, I'm close with both her club and elite coach, the Grebas, who are twin brothers, and they said that they've never seen anything like it. They've never seen an athlete overcome so many obstacles to then achieve gold and bronze twice on the Olympic stage.
It really is an inspirational story, and just really, like you said, it's a triumph, and I really commend her for just having both the mental and physical fortitude to go through all of that. And you mentioned as well that Simone Biles was very supportive of Suni throughout this entire process, which again just underscores what a great leader and athlete she is. Again, not just focusing on her own personal goals, Simone's, but looking after her teammates in every possible way. I think this says a lot about her.
Oh yeah, no, that's I mean, what's always stood out to me about Simone. I mean, of course, her talent is so obvious, but Suni Lee had a notable moment that I talk about in the book where she crashed at U.S. Nationals, and Simone saw it happen across the arena and immediately ran to her, to kind of remind her who she was. It was like, you're the defending Olympic all-around champion. You deserve to be here. Shake it off. Simone later said, she had been in Suni's shoes. She crashed at Tokyo, and she didn't have someone there to speak to her like that, to give her that support. So she wanted to be that supportive figure that she didn't have, to Suni, and that Suni cites that as a reason that she was able to keep going and ultimately make it to the Olympic trials and to the Olympic team. So, I mean, Simone really, I think, from the second she came on the senior elite stage in 2013, I was always struck, of course, by her talent, but by her demeanor, by her support for athletes. I think she's completely shifted the culture of the sport, and how athletes interact across countries. I mean, we used to see this kind of like general tension and hostility between Russia, China, and the United States. They wouldn't really talk to each other. It was kind of like, we're both out here for gold, and I'm trying to knock you down, and that has completely changed. You would see Simone hugging with Ilia Malinin of Russia, who is this icon for Russian gymnastics. I mean, it was completely unheard of, and now it's normalized, which I think is partly why Simone took that opportunity to support Suni. And the two of them have been a part of that shift, because you see Suni at the Olympics, jumping up and down, cheering for Italian and Chinese athletes. I mean, it's the culture has completely shifted, and it's beautiful. And I think it's largely due to Simone Biles.
It's definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, there's always work to be done, but we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah. So once again, that book is Flipping the Script, the 2024 U.S. Gymnastics Team's Journey to Olympic Gold. Caroline, it was an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Once again, you can read her work on Forbes Sports Money. You also have a very active TikTok as well that covers gymnastics and figure skating. What's the link to that?
I can send that to you. It's just my handle, which is Caroline. I have to check. Give me a second, please.
No worries.
It's Caroline at Caroline O. Price on TikTok. You'll see my photo, and then you'll see a lot of work, as you said, with figure skating and gymnastics. I unpack my articles a little bit more, and I give a little more spice than I think maybe I have in some of my writing. So would love for people to follow me there. I'm very active.
Well, please do, everyone. Caroline, this was awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to say as we close out?
I don't think so. I mean, just thank you so much for having me. I always love to be able to talk through these sports. Gymnastics is my greatest passion, and it's stemmed into figure skating. And I love to see that people are interested in talking about it. And I hope that we'll get more eyes on World Championships this month for figure skating, and NCAA Championships for gymnastics in April.
Excellent. Well, this was extremely informative. Hey, go Zebras.
Go Zebras.
All right.
Thanks, Jake.
Thanks, Caroline. Special thanks to Caroline Price again. To close out the show, as always, it's Jake's Takes. This past Thursday, ABC pulled The Bachelorette from their schedule, 3 days prior to the show's season premiere. The decision was made after TMZ published the 2023 video of Taylor Frankie Paul attacking her then-boyfriend, Dakota Mortensen, throwing several chairs at him. One of the chairs she threw hit her daughter. She subsequently pled guilty to aggravated assault. The incident was well known and had been documented in the Hulu series The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, which Taylor Frankie Paul also stars in. It was the release of the video that spurred ABC's decision. And this call came just one day after new Disney CEO Josh D'Amaro officially took the reins from Bob Iger. It is unclear when this season of The Bachelorette will air, if at all. The removal of this show, however, left a 2-hour vacancy for ABC on Sunday nights. For March 22nd, the planned premiere date, the network decided to put on a rerun of American Idol from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. This is a messy situation, and I do not want to ignore the severity of the video or the lives impacted. But let's focus for a moment on the scheduling component. Instead of showing a rerun, ABC could have just as easily filled their Sunday night with Women's March Madness. At 8 p.m., the same exact time, there was a 5 versus 4 matchup between Michigan State and Oklahoma, which was broadcasted on ESPN. 2 blue blood teams, a compelling matchup, good time slot. That game easily could have been simulcast on ABC in addition to being shown on ESPN. Women's basketball in the past several seasons has delivered strong ratings, and a Spartan Sooners game could have performed quite well on a broadcast network. Would have given it a nice viewership boost. This was a chance to create a positive out of a negative. It was a pretty easy and obvious thing to do, if you ask me, but for some reason they didn't go that route. ABC, by the way, will show 2 Women's Elite 8 games next Sunday in the afternoon. Oh, and in case you were wondering, the eventual result of that game that could have been on ABC, Oklahoma 77, Michigan State 71. A good game. Now, back to The Bachelorette. The Bachelor franchise, with all of its spin-offs, has been in the news far too frequently for the wrong reasons. Cast members have faced sexual misconduct allegations. The series creator was the subject of an HR investigation and left the show in 2023. A couple years later, the replacement showrunners left following allegations that created a hostile work environment. Several years ago, longtime host Chris Harrison was fired from the show after excusing racially offensive behavior from one of the contestants. Now, this franchise, it needs, frankly, a major course correction for it to continue, and needs much better vetting procedures to take place. Now that Disney has a new CEO, one has to wonder whether the show will survive at all, or if the last rose has been given out. In the previous pod, I aired my frustrations with outdoor races like running and cycling, where the course isn't clearly marked, and even more egregiously, when race organizers literally lead the athletes off the track, taking them down the wrong way. Well, guess what? It happened again. Yet again. Can you believe it? At the Milano Sanremo, a prestigious one-day cycling race, one of the monuments of cycling. A breakaway group were following the motorcycles in the official's car up ahead, which went the wrong way. The riders had to turn around, and they got back, but it cost them about half a minute. That being said, if you think about it, this is a 298-kilometer race. So even just a few seconds can expend a lot more energy than you have to in an already extremely grueling day. Lastly, Wimbledon will be using video review technology for the first time this summer. Center court and number 1 court will have video review available throughout the entire tennis tournament, while the number 2, 3, 12, and number 18 courts will have it only for the singles matches. This comes a year after electronic line calling was introduced, replacing line judges. So despite being steeped in tradition, Wimbledon nevertheless is willing to adapt to the times. And it's time for this episode to come to a close. A reminder, 4 video episodes of this pod are available on Twitter/X and YouTube. On Twitter, that's at Jake A. Klein, that is JakeAKline, and at Pathway to the Pod. On YouTube, it's at Pathway to the Podium Pod. You can also follow on Instagram, Pathway to the Podium. Also, just recently added a TikTok. Yes, I am going all in. I am going there. Which likewise, that is Pathway to the Podium. Hope you enjoyed today's conversation. Goodbye, everyone.